Ian was the most powerful mage in the Empire, so powerful that even the Emperor feared his growing power and strength. The Emperor himself poisoned Ian, hoping to get rid of him forever. But our hero had a trump card up his sleeve, a dagger imbued with forbidden time and magic. Ian used this last chance to go back in time. Gathering his last strength, he completed the spell, and everything plunged into darkness. A moment ago, he was a dying mage. Now he's just a boy on the street, though he still possesses the power and knowledge of an 8th Circle mage. He quickly sits up and feels his chest, but there is no trace of the dagger, and he doesn't even feel any pain. Suddenly, a familiar gentle voice calls him, demanding to know if everything is all right. It is Ian's mother, Paige. Looking at her, Ian's eyes widened in shock, unsure of how to respond as his mother has been dead for years. Quickly, he grabs his mother's hand, the hand he hasn't held for years, to make sure if it is afterlife or the spell actually worked. Looking around, he tries to understand what is going on. There are all children who are lined up for the examination, and soldiers from the castle managing the crowds. He scans the surroundings. Realization hits him hard. He spots the flag of Ivory Tower waving at the corner. He gazes at his small hands, finally certain that he has gone back 30 years, to the past. A moment flashes in Ian's mind. Himself, standing with a man holding his staff during the Mana Reactions examination. It's a test all children of the Green River Empire undergo when they turn 12, a mandatory procedure designed to identify and nurture exceptional mages. First, they are assessed for Mana Brain, the factor responsible for manifesting magic. Then they are tested for a Mana Heart, which governs the production, circulation, and storage of mana. Any child found to possess both traits is immediately accepted into the Academy of Magic and granted noble-level authority upon graduation. Ian never expected to find himself time-traveling 30 years back. He thinks of his dagger, engraved with the language of dragons. He'd spent his life researching it, along with time magic, and had activated the spell just before his death. Ragnar was Ian's closest friend. Ian had done much to help Ragnar over the years, but in his loyalty, Ian had also killed thousands for Ragnar, and in the end, Ragnar repaid him by taking his life. Ian can't let that happen again. To prevent it, he needs to regain all the power and authority he once held as an 8th-class mage. With that in mind, Ian promises his mother that he'll return soon. Ian approaches a knight, introduces himself, and is instantly recognized as Vanessa's son. The knight permits him to pass. As Ian enters the tent, Marco, a mage, is sitting in his chair, exhausted. He sighs at Captain Aaron, questioning how many more children he has to assess. Captain Aaron responds that there's at least half a day's worth of children left. The moment Ian steps into the tent, Marco's tired expression shifts to a warm smile. He sends a wave of mana toward Ian's head, warning him that he might feel a little dizzy. When Ian hesitates, Marco informs him that he's detected a mana brain within him, and that he'll need to check for a mana heart as well. Ian, however, surprises the mage by saying he has something to show him. Marco, confused, allows him to proceed. Ian takes a deep breath, and within moments, a fiery orb appears in one hand. With a focused look, Ian combines the fire spell with a water spell. Marco's eyes widen in disbelief as he watches Ian effortlessly cast 2 opposing spells at once. After showing off his abilities, Ian casually mentions that he's been able to do this for a while now. The captain and the knights present are stunned. Marco, still in disbelief, asks if someone taught him this. Ian denies it, saying no one did. Suspicious, Marco presses again, using his interrogation magic, which checks a person's biological reactions, like their heartbeat, to determine if they're lying. Marco warns that if Ian's lying, he could be charged with treason. Despite the threat, Ian remains calm and assures Marco that he would never lie to a noble mage like him. Marco chuckles and uses his magic, which reveals Ian is telling the truth. This only increases Marco's curiosity, leaving him wondering just what kind of child Ian really is. Suddenly, a woman's scream cuts through the air. Ian's heart races as he looks outside the tent, only to be stunned by the scene before him. His mother is being roughly dragged by the same knight who had let Ian in. Vanessa pleads, clearly terrified, while the knight, in a cruel attempt to justify his actions, claims she was loitering where she shouldn't be, calling her a lowly peasant woman. The knights, including Captain Aaron and Marco, rush outside to investigate. The knight continues to lie, but Ian's fury ignites as he hears the words. Just as he's about to act, Marco gently taps his shoulder, calming him down. Marco steps forward, addressing the group. He elaborates that this child has just demonstrated that he possesses both the Mana Brain and Mana Heart, meaning he and his parents are of the same standing as nobles in their empire. Insulting a noble or mage is tantamount to challenging the authority of the imperial family and the Ivory Tower. The knight's actions, therefore, amount to treason, punishable by execution. The knight immediately drops to his knees, begging for mercy. Ian, however, turns to his mother and says the apology is for her, not him. He kneels before the knight, warning him that he will always keep a close eye on him. Later, Ian expresses his gratitude to Marco for intervening. Marco, with a knowing glance, instructs Captain Aaron to ensure that Ian and his mother are protected for the time being. Aaron leads them to an inn where the knights are staying. As they leave, Marco watches them go, his thoughts heavy. He realizes that Ian is far more talented and intelligent than any child he's encountered. He's certain the Ivory Tower and the Imperial family will be stunned by news of such a mage. That same night, the same knight who had misbehaved with Vanessa was walking down the street, still exuding arrogance. He had no shame, especially when he openly called Ian's mother a lowly peasant woman. But little did he know, a figure in a cloak was trailing him from behind, listening to every word he murmured. It was none other than Ian. With a focused thought, Ian cast his paralyze magic, freezing the knight in place. Ian then faced him, calmly reminding him that he would be keeping a watchful eye on him. The knight's breath quickened, fear starting to take hold of him. Ian added, with a cold tone, how the knight had been disgraced by the son of a lowly peasant woman. He then fabricated a story, claiming that the knight had gotten drunk and drowned. The moment the words left Ian's lips, he shoved the knight off the bridge, sending him tumbling into the rushing waters below. Ian stood there, watching him drown, reflecting on how the knight's fate had unraveled. He couldn't help but wonder about his own past, how he'd spent years researching Dragonian magic to turn back time, to fix his mistakes. But now, he realized that such a thing was impossible. To protect what mattered to him, Ian swore he would do whatever it took. He watched the knight struggle in the water and murmured to himself. He would resent him if need be, but forgiveness wasn't necessary. This was the same sentiment Ragnar had shared with him after poisoning Ian. At that moment, Ian finally began to understand why Ragnar had said those words. Back in the inn, Ian sat with his hand against his aching head. He hadn't realized that using so much mana would drain him. His focus then shifted to his mother, who was peacefully sleeping beside him. He knew what the future held. In his past life, when he had become a first-class mage, his mother had passed away from a disease that very same year. All Ian wanted now was a long and healthy life with her. In his previous life, he had lost everything, but this time, he vowed not to let that happen again. The next morning, inside the royal palace, Emperor Terry sought the advice of Master Herbert Leon. Herbert explained that mana was a natural energy, and once someone learned to control it, they were considered a mage. The methods to stimulate the mana brain and the techniques to manifest magic were usually taught by academy teachers. That's how most mages learned their craft. However, news had reached him that a boy named Ian had learned to control mana on his own, without a teacher. Herbert elaborated further, stating that Ian had even cast first-class magic, just like the primal mage, an ancient mage who had mastered magic in a time when no other mage existed. Terry listened intently, curious but skeptical, thinking Ian might be bluffing. But Herbert reassured him, stating that the tales of the primal mage were not just myths. If this boy truly had such abilities, he could be dangerously talented. Herbert felt he needed to see Ian for himself to confirm whether the rumors were true. As their conversation came to a close, Terry summoned Hayden Greenriver, the crown prince. Hayden approached and politely asked the reason for being called. Terry reminded him that it had been 5 years since Hayden had last left the Imperial Palace. Back then, he had gone out to inspect the famine's severity, but now it was time for him to go on another journey. Terry explained that he was granting Hayden command of the Knights of the Second Imperial Order, 300 soldiers, and 3 third-class mages. His mission was to travel to Mogrian and bring back the boy named Ian Paige. Hayden hesitated, but after Terry suggested he assist someone else, Hayden nervously agreed to the task. Later, Herbert, eager to begin, asked for permission to leave as well. He needed to start venturing out now, for if he didn't persuade the right people soon, he feared he wouldn't even be able to select 3 mages to accompany the crown prince. Terry chuckled and gave him permission to go. The moment Herbert stepped out of the hall, a young slave approached him and asked if he was returning to the tower. Herbert's expression darkened, and he revealed that he had someplace else to go first. The next day, Ian waited, fully aware that both the Imperial family and the Ivory Tower must be on the move by now. A flashback of Marco crossed his mind. Considering that Marco had declared Ian a mage right after the examination, it seemed highly likely that he had immediately reported Ian's abilities to his superiors. But no matter who was involved, whether it was the Emperor, the Tower Master, or even some third party, he knew one thing for certain. This time, he would not be a disposable pawn. A few moments later, an announcement echoed outside Ian's house, calling for Ian Paige to come forward and receive an order directly from His Majesty, the Emperor. Ian flinched at the sudden proclamation. When he looked out the window, he saw Marco standing there with his subordinates. Marco, noticing Ian, smiled and wasted no time getting to the point. He explained that His Majesty had sent an imperial decree for Ian. With that, Marco instructed Ian to kneel on his right knee and place his left hand over his chest. Ian followed the instructions without hesitation, though he couldn't help but feel something familiar about the gesture. Marco, ignoring his own odd sense of recognition, extended his hand, holding a crystal sphere. A command appeared within it, sent directly from the Emperor himself. The Emperor approved of Ian's talent and nominated him as a Mage of the Empire. The decree went on to grant Ian permission to have his name carved into the Ivory Tower's Hall of Mages. Terry, the Emperor, also informed Ian that his firstborn son would accompany him to the palace. The Emperor wished for Ian to have a safe and enjoyable journey with his son's company. As the decree concluded, Ian slowly stood, understanding that the Emperor's intentions were crystal clear. One of the knights, Arnold, approached Marco with a request to escort Ian to Lord Mogrian's castle. Marco granted permission with politeness, and soon after, Arnold stepped forward. He knelt slightly, announcing that he had been granted the honor of serving Ian while he was at Mogrian. The journey continued, and they eventually arrived at the Mogrian Empire, finally reaching Marcus Mogrian, the Lord of Mogrian's castle. As the carriage pulled up, Marcus immediately warned Lavi and Margaret to treat the noble mage with the utmost respect. The castle's inhabitants gathered outside, eagerly watching Ian dismount from the carriage, helping his mother as she stepped down beside him. As they approached, Marcus greeted them warmly. 15 days passed, and rumors began to spread among the servants. They claimed to have seen the young boy at the training hall, where he was reportedly casting fire from his hands. He hadn't left the hall for 15 straight days. Inside the training hall, Ian was still focused on his training. He cast another spell, watching as the ground froze beneath him, but it still wasn't enough. He was acutely aware that his body was still too young, and he needed to make up for his limited mana. Just as his mind began to wander, the butler hurried in, breathless and panicked. With urgency, he begged for Ian's help, revealing that Lord Mogrian had gone out to hunt goblins the previous day and hadn't returned since. They had searched for hours, but still, there was no sign of him. Ian found the situation strange. It wasn't time for Marcus to die yet. In his past life, Lord Mogrian had been assassinated by one of Green River's enemies just before the First Unification War, a war that wouldn't occur for several more years. His son, Lavi Mogrian, had fled when the war broke out and was later executed after its conclusion. Given the current circumstances, Ian reminded the butler of Marco, who was far more experienced than he was. However, the butler informed Ian that Marco had other duties to attend to and wasn't currently in Mogrian. Ian was now uncertain. Maybe his return had actually changed something, for mages assigned to specific domains rarely left their posts. Ian knew the advantage he held. He knew what would happen in the future. But if Lord Mogrian's untimely death changed the course of events, he could lose that advantage. These thoughts swirled in his mind as he considered the situation. But the butler's desperate plea for help pulled him back to reality. He knew he couldn't let such an event happen. He agreed to help, determined not to let this change the future he was striving to protect. Vanessa is filled with worry after hearing that Ian is heading into the mountains with the search party. Ian reassures her, though, promising that he'll be back soon. Meanwhile, Margaret rushes toward him, her eyes brimming with tears. She begs Ian to find her brother and father, offering him anything in return. As Ian listens, his gaze lands on the ring she's wearing, and he can sense mana emanating from it. Curious, Ian asks Margaret if she would lend him the ring, explaining that it will be crucial to his search. Without hesitation, she hands it over, and Ian quickly slips it onto his finger. The moment he does, it feels familiar, just like it did in his past life. The ring is the Mogrian ring, a low-ranking artifact known for boosting the wearer's mana. It seems that Lord Mogrian gave it to his daughter instead of his chosen successor. With the ring now in his possession, the group continues their search. They venture deeper into the forest, and one of the knights points out where they lost track of the missing people. Blood is splattered across the ground, and Ian asks if they've already disposed of the bodies. The knights tell him there were no bodies, and they fear that the monsters might have taken them. Ian takes a careful look at the scene. Dozens of goblins have been slain, indicating that there were likely hundreds more who attacked the group. It dawns on him that there's no time to waste. Without hesitation, Ian raises his hand and summons a wolf spirit. A magical array forms in the air, and a stream of energy radiates from it. The knights stare in awe as a loud howl echoes in the distance. Suddenly, a baby wolf materializes in front of them. Ian hadn't expected the wolf to be so small, but given his current mana, that was the best he could do. He commands the wolf to track the scent of the blood, instructing the knights to follow it. Despite their reluctance, they comply. As they journey further into the deepening forest, Marcus continues to fend off the goblins with his staff. His head is injured, and blood is trickling down his face. Surrounded by goblins, he knows they're all on the verge of being overwhelmed. With little choice, Marcus orders Lavi to go back to the castle and warn everyone. He tells Lavi to inform them that the goblin hordes have taken Mount Mogrian, and they're all in grave danger. Just as Lavi is about to leave, his body trembles with fear. His eyes widen when he spots a goblin leaping through the air, preparing to attack Marcus from behind. In a panicked voice, Lavi tries to warn his father, but before he can react, a loud thud echoes in the air. Ian and his subordinates have arrived just in time. With a swift motion, Ian casts his Frost Nova spell, freezing the goblin in place and preventing the attack. Footsteps draw closer to Marcus, and the last thing he sees is Ian's face before everything goes black. 2 days later, Marcus slowly opened his eyes, still in a daze, lying in bed. The haze in his mind made it hard to focus, but he could hear the faint sound of his daughter crying nearby. As his senses started to return, he sat up, still trying to process what had happened. His memories were foggy, and he couldn't quite recall everything from before. Margaret, seeing him awake, quickly rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face as she explained that Ian had rescued both him and Levi. She sobbed, relieved yet worried, sharing that both Marcus's father and brother had been bedridden for 2 days. Just then, Hogar burst into the room, his face filled with relief as he thanked God that Lord Mogrian had finally woken. Marcus, still weak, asked about the other knights and his sons, his voice tinged with concern. Hogar, his expression turning somber, explained that they had lost 12 men, including Sir Rothan. Hearing this, Marcus's heart sank, and he immediately asked to speak with Ian in person. Later, in the training hall, Ian could hear a familiar voice calling his name. It was Hogar, coming to inform him that Lord Mogrian had woken up. Hogar believed that Marcus had something important to discuss with Ian, and out of curiosity, Ian decided to leave his training session. As he walked toward his office, he unexpectedly ran into both Marcus and Lavi. Ian greeted them with a warm smile, asking about their condition. Lavi, filled with gratitude, thanked him profusely for saving both of them. Marcus, too, offered his heartfelt thanks on behalf of everyone. He then gestured to a box on a nearby table, explaining that after some thought, he believed this might be one way to repay Ian for everything. Without hesitation, Ian opened the box, his eyes widening in surprise. Inside was the same mana ring that he had once lent to Margaret. Marcus, looking a bit sheepish, admitted that Margaret had told him everything about it. He had thought it was just an old family heirloom, but now he asked Ian if it held any special power, and whether it might be of use to him. Ian nodded thoughtfully, revealing that the ring amplified the wearer's mana, a crucial tool for eliminating mountains. Marcus, pleased with this answer, handed the ring to Ian, saying it should serve as a token of his gratitude. Ian, puzzled by the word token, asked Marcus to explain further. Marcus, with a solemn tone, explained that the ring would symbolize an oath to Ian. From this moment on, Ian Paige would be an honored guest of House Mogrian, and should Ian ever need their help, they would be at his service. He swore on the northernmost stream of the Emerald River that he and his descendants would uphold this vow for as long as Ian's line continued. With that, both Lavi and Marcus bowed slightly in respect. Later, as Ian and the knights made their way through the forest toward Lloyd Village, Ian's thoughts drifted back to a conversation he'd had earlier with Marcus. He had asked about any alchemists who might be able to create elixirs, to which Marcus had mentioned an alchemist named Ratheo. Ian had never heard of Ratheo before in his past life, but he hoped that this alchemist would be able to help him create an elixir to compensate for his lack of mana. Just as Ian was lost in thought, his attention was suddenly caught by the sight of Lloyd Village in the distance. The entire village was engulfed in flames, a horrible sight that sent a chill down his spine. As the knights drew closer, they realized that bandits had attacked the village. Not only had the homes been set on fire, but the villagers were being mercilessly slaughtered. One bandit, wielding an axe and clearly the leader, shouted orders to his men, urging them to hurry and grab the children, taking whatever they could. The bandits seized a young boy named Douglas, and when his father attempted to intervene, he was knocked to the ground. The leader of the bandits, seeing that the boy wasn't compliant, decided to make an example of his father. Without hesitation, he raised his weapon and approached the man lying on the ground, prepared to kill him. He promised the boy's father that Douglas would be sold off at a good price elsewhere. As the leader prepared to strike the final blow, Douglas screamed in terror, desperate to reach his father. But just as he did, something happened that left him in stunned silence, his screams of horror dying in his throat. Abruptly, a spike of ice shot through the bandit leader's body, killing him instantly. The remaining bandits screamed in terror, completely baffled by the origin of the ice. But as they realized where it had come from, panic set in, and they ran for their lives. However, Ian wasn't about to let them escape so easily. With a flick of his wrist, he sent sharp ice skates plummeting downwards toward the fleeing bandits. No matter how fast they ran, they couldn't outrun the cold, and one by one, they all met their end. Ian's eyes shifted toward the ring on his finger, his thoughts briefly interrupted by the sight. The ring was doing its job well. With it, his mana now rivaled that of a third-class mage. The fire had been extinguished, and people were visibly relieved. Still, Ian's mind lingered on a darker thought. He felt deeply saddened by the tragedy that had unfolded here. Just then, Captain Arnold spotted him and made his way over. Ian asked if any soldiers had been hurt, to which Arnold let out a relieved sigh. All of them were unscathed. Ian allowed himself a small sense of satisfaction at this, but his relief was fleeting. His thoughts returned to the man he had come here for, wondering if he had survived. Before he could dwell on it further, a voice rang out, calling, "Rathio!" It was the name of the man Ian had been searching for, the father of Douglas. Rathio had been knocked out by the bandits and was now in critical condition. Douglas stood at his side, crying and calling out for his father's name. Ian hurried over, gently reassuring Douglas that he would take a look at Rathio. As Ian examined him, he could immediately tell something was off. Rathio's skin had turned unnaturally pale, his hair stark white. The signs pointed to one thing: mana poisoning. It was clear that Rathio couldn't have injected mana into his body on his own, meaning a mage with ill intentions had done this to him. His condition was dire, and Ian knew that time was running out. Without wasting another moment, Ian placed 2 fingers on Rathio's forehead, focusing his mana into him. The process was delicate, but it worked instantly. The man's breathing steadied, and color returned to his skin. As Ian moved to step away, Douglas grabbed hold of Ian's cloak, stopping him. He demanded to know how his father was doing. Ian didn't sugarcoat it. He told Douglas that Rathio would be okay for now, but the mana Ian had given him wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the mana residue would build up again, and Rathio would have to make a choice. Either continue receiving mana injections for the rest of his life, or die. The truth hit Douglas hard. Tears welled in his eyes and he sobbed uncontrollably. He vowed to find the Landinor flower to cure his father. Ian's mind clicked into place as he remembered the name of one of Green River's most brilliant alchemists, Douglas Heyman, the Imperial Alchemist. In his past life, Douglas had despised and doubted mages, which now made sense. Ian pieced the situation together. An alchemist poisoned by a mage, a rare herb sought in the north, and a poison designed to neutralize mana. His memories fell into place like puzzle pieces. Before he could process it further, Ian turned to Douglas. It was clear that the boy would do something reckless if left to his own devices. Ian used his magic to put Douglas to sleep, gently easing him into unconsciousness. Once Douglas was resting, Ian carried him to a nearby tree and set him down carefully. As Ian observed the boy, a strange feeling came over him. Douglas looked exactly as he had in his past life, though this time, without the hostile aura. Despite knowing that Douglas was the one responsible for the poison Ian had drunk, Ian couldn't bring himself to simply end his life now. This boy would become the greatest alchemist in history. Perhaps making him an ally was the right choice, but there was no guarantee that he wouldn't betray Ian at some point. Before Ian could fully consider his next move, Arnold appeared, catching up to him. He had seen Ian run off and wanted to make sure he was okay. Arnold's gaze shifted to the unconscious boy lying against the tree. Ian sighed and explained that the boy was from the village, and he had put him to sleep for his own safety. Ian then suggested Arnold take Douglas back while he took care of some business elsewhere. Arnold gave a reluctant nod, clearly wanting to ask more but trusting Ian's judgment. He moved to lift Douglas, preparing to carry him back. Meanwhile, Ian turned away, his mind racing with the events that had just unfolded and the uncertain future ahead. The night has fallen, and Rathio, upon waking up, immediately comes to sit beside Douglas's bed, asking him if he is asleep. Not even moving a bit, Douglas lets him know not yet. When Rathio notices Douglas's cold behavior, he tries talking to him, informing him that Barton told him that some mage came to their village to save them. In addition to that, he also said that Douglas almost got himself in trouble. Not able to face his father, he tiredly explains, he was just trying to find the flower. Upon hearing this, his father scolds him, demanding to know what he was thinking, as he could have gotten himself kidnapped by bandits. Douglas couldn't control his anger anymore, so he jumped up, questioning Rathio what he was even supposed to do then. That mage said that Rathio was going to be sick for the rest of his life. Rathio narrows his eyes, assuring his son that he is absolutely fine, but they just have to find the Landor flower. The tears Douglas was trying to control are now falling out of his eyes. He sobs for his dying father. They have been searching for over a year, and they still haven't found it. Douglas now even doubts its existence. Suddenly outside from Rathio's house, a voice breaks in, assuring them, it does exist. Both Rathio and Douglas are stunned because of the sudden voice. Scared, Rathio calls out towards the door, confirming who it is. It is none other than Ian. He has returned, admitting he has overheard them looking for Landor flowers. Upon hearing Ian's words, Rathio ends up opening the door. He is surprised to see a young boy visiting their house. Ian greets them and takes permission to come in. As he steps inside, lowering his cloak, Douglas is in shock seeing the mage from earlier. Though Ratheo has no idea about it, Ian introduces himself while placing a crystal on a nearby table. Ratheo examines the crystal, realizing it is the Landior flower. Ian promises to give him this flower only if he answers Ian's question. Without hesitating, he begins to question him without waiting for Ratheo's response. How does Ratheo know what this herb can do? There are only a few people who know about this flower's medicinal uses. Ratheo hesitates a bit, but reveals he read about it in a guidebook. Ratheo shows Ian that guidebook, elaborating that his father handed this medicinal herb guidebook down to him. Flipping through a few pages, Ratheo points to Ian on a page. The book contained notes about the Landior flower, describing that it restores mana equilibrium and is only found in the northern part of the continent. 12 petals, all a dark violet color, and the blue leaves and stem are poisonous. The plant withers the moment it leaves the place it's rooted. Out of curiosity, after reading it, Ian questions Ratheo if his father studied alchemy too, so he gets to know it was a family business, meaning this guidebook is a family heirloom. Ian reminds him that if he knows that this flower can neutralize mana, then he must also be aware of what this does to mages who possess a mana heart and a mana brain. It can be used as a deadly poison. Ratheo flinches. Hearing this, he understands where Ian is getting at, but he assures Ian that alchemists from his family would never make an elixir to harm a person. He can swear that on the name of Hammon. As those words settle in his mind, Ian glances at Douglas and thanks Ratheo for answering, and apologizes at the same time while picking up the crystalline flower. He begins to remove the ice magic, allowing the flower to return to its original form, but he couldn't save it either. The best he could do was keep it from wilting by freezing it. Seeing this, Ratheo suspects him of tricking them, but Ian simply clarifies that he is trying to show that he can help him find the Landior flower at any time. In that case, he needs to make a deal. Ian will regularly inject mana into his body so that he won't lose his life from mana poisoning. He also offers to help him with his research on Landior so that Ratheo can use it for medicine. In return, he would like Ratheo to come to the capital with Ian. Ian is clever enough to offer him this, as he will be able to find the records of the poison Ragnar and Douglas used in his past life. Hearing the favor, Ratheo doesn't understand his purpose of going back to the capital, so to elaborate further, he explains he would like Ratheo to manufacture mana elixirs that can replenish a mage's mana and create medicine for his frail mother. Before interrupting, Ratheo apologizes but suggests Ian assist with a more well-known alchemist. After all, he is the mage of the Empire. However, Ian confesses what he is looking for is someone to stay with him and manufacture custom-made elixirs. He reminds Ratheo that his son ran into the dangerous forest without a moment's hesitation to find the herb to heal his disease. So for the sake of his safety and well-being, Ian hopes that Ratheo will make the right choice. Ratheo is now aware that this child is no ordinary mage and asks for some time. Ian gives him some time and looks at Ratheo talking to his son, promising to himself, in this life, Douglas will not lose his father. He also won't have to become a slave, and most importantly, Ian will never let him fall into Ragnar's hands. Waiting outside Ratheo's house, Captain Arnold approaches Ian, informing him about finishing the preparations for their journey back to the castle. Upon receiving this information, Ian glances at Ratheo's house, sighing sadly, assuming Ratheo hasn't made up his mind still, and decides to head on back. Unexpectedly, the door of Ratheo's house creaks open. Ratheo and his son step out of the house, carrying their luggage. Meanwhile, Douglas is startled to see a mage waiting for them outside their house. Immediately, Ian approaches them to confirm if he has come to a decision. Ratheo scratches his head, admitting it is not like he has a choice in the first place, as he has a disease to beat, so he hopes Ian will keep his end of the bargain. Ian assures him, but they both are interrupted when Douglas confirms from Ian if he can really make his dad's disease go away. Ian's promise fills Douglas with excitement, and he eagerly seeks permission to address him as captain. It confuses Ian, but he allows it, though a picture of older Douglas comes in his mind, which makes him a little uneasy, wondering if this is what Douglas was like as a child. Suddenly, a horse galloped towards where they were standing. A knight quickly informed Ian about the need for his immediate presence at Lord Mogrian's castle. Not being aware of the problem, Ian demands to know the reason. The knight explains with urgency, the Crown Prince has crossed the Gamus River. This is confusing. They received the message just this morning, so why didn't they inform them earlier? Ian then requests the knight to lend the horse to him. Using his taming skill, he instructs the horse to go to Mogrian Castle with him. The horse immediately obeys and kneels down. Sitting on the horse, Ian guides Arnold to escort Ratheo to the castle, though both Ratheo and Arnold look at the horse's behavior in astonishment. Back to 2 days earlier when the escort of Prince Hayden had just crossed the Gamus River. Inside the carriage, Prince Hayden glances out the window. His mind wanders with thoughts. He recalls the conversation he had with his father, Terry, before this journey. Terry called Hayden in his office. He wanted to tell Hayden something before he went. He heard that Master Herbert has been seeing the fifth prince quite often these days. Many nobles have a tendency to follow the ivory tower's lead. Thus, the person whose side the Tower Master takes will gain the support of those nobles. And now, Herbert has made it clear that he is supporting the fifth prince. Moreover, Ragnar the fifth prince is a very clever child. Terry is sure Ragnar will use the Tower Master to make many people his allies. That is why Hayden must do everything he can to make Ian Paige swear his loyalty to him. Terry insists his son make Ian his ally and build a foundation for himself before the ivory tower intervenes. Hayden felt pressurized. He was troubled by the task ahead. Mage or not, he is still only a child. He wondered, what good will Ian be? There are dozens of mages in the ivory tower, and yet none of them are at Hayden's side. Years later, Ian calls out to their daughter, Johanna, asking her to come to them. Johanna smiles brightly, running to them and calling Ian, Papa. Rage fills his eyes, thinking, how dare they support the fifth prince instead of him? He is the crown prince. He vowed to himself silently, on the day he becomes emperor, he will get rid of all those treacherous fools. As Hayden was lost in his thoughts, captain of the Second Imperial Order of Knights, Oliver Raywood called out to him from outside, acknowledging it was a bit late, but suggesting they let Lord Mogrian know where they were. Hayden seems uninterested, reminding him that they have already discussed this. Oliver politely advises that they will need time to prepare for Hayden's arrival, and begs him to be more understanding. Out of curiosity, he questions Oliver if his family is one of Mogrian's vassals, and how much time remains until they reach Mogrian. Oliver confirms that his family serves as a vassal and informs him that they have 2 days left. That being said, Hayden thinks and is sure that 2 days will suffice and allows him to let them know he is coming. He smirks, looking down on them, and wants to see how those who call themselves the Guardians of the North and the Empire's Shield prepare themselves to greet a member of the Imperial family in that short period of time. Although Oliver doesn't really like this attitude of Hayden, obviously he couldn't really do much about it and obeys his command. As soon as news of His Highness's arrival reached the Mogrian castle, Marcus was thrown into a frenzy of activity. He was both worried and drained, having not received a single word, which led him to believe the prince would arrive later than expected. Spotting Hogar, he urgently inquired whether the other families had arrived yet. Hogar quickly reported that all the families were present, except for House McFarden and House Raywood. He then asked about Ian's whereabouts. Hogar hesitated and then lowered his head, shaking it in denial. Marcus let out a weary sigh, fully aware that the situation was spiraling into chaos. A few moments later, a knight made an announcement about the arrival of the Crown Prince. As Prince Hayden was about to enter the castle, a nobleman asked Marcus about Ian's whereabouts. Just then, the sound of horse hooves grew louder in the distance. Ian appeared, panting and exhausted, nearly collapsed over the horse's saddle. He immediately apologized for being late. Marcus rushed to lift Ian down from the horse, assuring him it was fine and that he had arrived just in time. The nobles stood in shock, staring at the young mage who could barely maintain his balance. Marcus draped an arm around Ian's shoulder and explained that it was customary for those who had received an imperial order to take the place of honor and stand at the front. As he finished speaking, Ian and Marcus faced Hayden. It had been a long time since Ian had seen Prince Hayden, and the 3 magesses who accompanied him stood close. One of them, Cecilia, smiled at Ian, and he smiled back, though he knew well enough she was a spy from the Coldwood Empire. Later that evening, a grand banquet was held at the castle in honor of Prince Hayden's arrival. Oliver advised Hayden to avoid drinking too much, but Hayden coldly retorted that the wine was the only thing that actually tasted good here. He hated the banquet just as much as he disliked Ian. He urged Marcus to return soon and get some rest. Meanwhile, Cecilia, holding a glass of wine, wasn't focused on drinking. She couldn't understand why the Coldwood Empire would be interested in someone like Ian. Recently, she had received 2 orders from the Empire. First, to determine whether the rumors about Ian Paige were true, and second, if they were, she was to take both Ian and his mother alive and return to Coldwood immediately. So, Cecilia set off in search of Ian and eventually found him alone outside the training ground at Marcus's castle. To test his abilities, she silently approached him and cast countless sharp magic missiles at him. The spells struck the ground, but Ian remained unharmed. Cecilia stood frozen in place, stunned. Ian turned to face her, demanding to know who she was. Cecilia raised an eyebrow, asking if he couldn't tell, and introduced herself as a senior mage from the Ivory Tower. She added that her attack was just a greeting and mocked him for having such a temper. Before she could say more, Ian's expression darkened, and he addressed her by her full name, Cecilia Coldwalker. Cecilia flinched, taken aback by the mention of her full name, unable to comprehend how he knew it. Ian smirked, revealing that he knew exactly who she was. In his past life, It was his duty to seek out and eliminate all Cold Walkers hiding in the Empire. He challenged her to name her other comrades. She urged him to stop, but Ian took a step forward, naming several spies. Yol, the stable-keeper on Mullion Avenue, Robin, the Imperial Secretary, Ario, from the Border Defense Squad, 9th Infantry, and Isabel, the head maid of the Imperial Villa. He then challenged her to guess what these people had in common, though he already knew the answer. Cecilia narrowed her eyes, conjuring a fireball in her hand and hurling it at Ian. The fireball exploded on impact, but to Cecilia's surprise, the flames were extinguished by some unknown force. Ian's suspicions were confirmed. Cecilia was indeed a Cold Walker. Before she could react, Ian calmly explained that he had come here because he had predicted she would seek him out. No sooner had the words left his mouth than dozens of ice shards shot towards Cecilia. Her eyes widened in horror as they came closer. Paige moved his hand, casting an ice spear spell, causing Cecilia to tense up. Quickly, she summoned a mana barrier in front of her for protection. She could feel the pressure building, sweat starting to form on her brow as she gritted her teeth. Ian curled his fingers, conjuring a pyroblast ball, then hurled it directly at her. Cecilia realized she couldn't move with her mana barrier up, and the overwhelming force of the blast meant she was likely going to die. The barrier began to crack under the intensity of the pyroblast, icy fragments from the attack slicing across her skin. Panic set in as she tried to run, only to be knocked off balance by the massive explosion. As she lay on the ground, she reassured herself that she was still alive. She thought to herself that since Ian had used up his mana with the pyroblast, he must be exhausted. She also realized that help would be coming soon, but there was no concrete evidence linking her to being a spy. The others wouldn't suspect her, especially not because of a child like Ian. As long as she healed herself first, she could deal with him later, and the magicians of the tower would trust her too. Ian approached with a smirk, revealing his plan. He intended to make a name for himself by selling her. Cecilia smirked back, asking if he really thought that would work. Ian's grin widened, confirming her suspicion. He then added that he had proof that neither she nor the Cold Walkers were aware of. Annoyed, Cecilia demanded to know what he was talking about. Just then, Captain Oliver Raywood arrived, flanked by others, and asked what had happened. Two men rushed toward Cecilia, one of them kneeling to check on her wounds. Ian casually replied that he'd been the one who did it. Captain Oliver Raywood, now looking to understand the situation, asked Ian to explain himself. Ian claimed that he had seen Cecilia talking to someone wearing a mask, and then, out of nowhere, she had tried to kill him. Cecilia, her voice filled with anger, yelled at Ian, demanding to know what he was saying. Ian, unfazed, informed them that it was because of that encounter that he had attacked her in self-defense. Captain Oliver Raywood, not easily convinced, asked Ian if that was truly the reason for his actions. Ian nodded, reaffirming that it was a matter of survival. Raywood then asked Ian to prove his claim. Ian explained that he had seen Cecilia and the masked figure searching their bodies and marking them. Raywood immediately ordered his guards to search Cecilia. Panic gripped Cecilia as the men who had accompanied her stepped forward to intervene. One of them protested, reminding Captain Raywood that Cecilia was a magician from the Ivory Tower and questioning the necessity of searching her body. Raywood unsheathed his sword, holding it in front of the men as a warning. He declared that Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver was present, and everything that had happened was witnessed in his presence. Whether or not the Tower magicians were involved, they all had a duty to uncover the truth. The protesting man raised his hands in surrender, pleading with Captain Raywood to allow them to heal Cecilia first before proceeding with the investigation. Raywood, without hesitation, turned away, stating that the healing could come after the examination. His female guards then took charge, examining Cecilia's body. Once the examination was complete, Captain Raywood asked his female guards if they had found anything suspicious on Cecilia. The guards reported that there was nothing out of the ordinary. The two men accompanying Cecilia, still agitated, yelled at Captain Raywood, demanding to know how he could suspect her. They insisted she needed to be healed immediately. Raywood, however, turned his attention to Ian and asked if he had been lying. Ian shook his head, denying the accusation. Then, with a smirk, he approached Cecilia, apologizing, and placed his glowing fingers on the back of her neck. The group watched in shock as a mana seal mark appeared on Cecilia's nape. Furious, Cecilia glared at Ian, demanding to know what he had done. Ian smirked again, revealing that he had been curious about what she was doing with the masked figure. Now it seemed like they had been checking for this very mark. Ian's mind briefly wandered back to the past, recalling how Cold Walkers were sent to training schools with such marks, which they weren't aware of. Only their managers knew about them. Ian himself had only learned the truth after a year of interrogating a manager. Back in the present, Captain Raywood, turning to the group, asked if anyone knew what the mark meant. One man replied that it was his first time seeing it. Captain Raywood asked Ian the same question, and Ian answered, admitting it was the first time he had seen such a mark as well. Captain Raywood, though, didn't let the uncertainty of its meaning deter him. He recognized that the mark itself was still a form of evidence. He ordered Cecilia to be healed first and promised that they would interrogate her afterward. He instructed his men to prepare a mana prison, and they acknowledged his order. Turning to Ian, Captain Raywood added that if everything turned out to be true, the Emperor would reward him. Sitting on the sofa, Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver asked Captain Oliver Raywood to confirm whether a child like Ian had really defeated a third-class magician from the Ivory Tower. Oliver Raywood confirmed the question. Hayden laughed, surprised by the news, saying that he never expected a child to possess such skill. He then asked Oliver what he thought about Ian. Captain Oliver Raywood replied that according to the magicians who had been dispatched, it seemed true. Ian's behavior and speech were far beyond that of a typical child. Hayden Greenriver, intrigued, told Oliver that he believed he should meet Ian and speak with him personally before forming any conclusions. He then ordered Oliver to bring Ian to him. After some time, Ian stood before Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver. He bowed his head respectfully and asked why he had been called. Hayden rose from the sofa, looking down at Ian. He explained that, from what he had heard, one of the magicians sent by the Ivory Tower was actually a spy from Coldwood, and that she was quite a skilled magician. Hayden praised Ian, telling him that he believed his achievement in capturing Cecilia was significant. Ian, flattered, replied humbly. Hayden continued, saying he would like to reward Ian for his efforts, and asked what Ian wanted. Ian realized that Hayden was trying to gauge his true desires with this question. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should share his wishes. Ultimately, he decided to be open. Ian looked up at Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver and said that, if it was possible, he would like to visit the site of the old Ivory Tower on the path to the Imperial Castle. Hayden raised an eyebrow, asking why Ian would want to go there, since there wasn't much to see. Ian replied that he had only heard stories about the place, and had always wanted to see it for himself. Hayden assumed Ian simply wanted to visit a historical site, dismissing it as a childish desire. He thought to himself that Ian was still just a kid. After a moment he agreed, telling Ian that he would take him there. Ian smirked internally, realizing he could get what he wanted far sooner than expected. He recalled the old Ivory Tower site and the item hidden deep beneath it from his past life. It was the Dragon Language book, which had been crucial to time magic research. He remembered finding it just a few years before his death, only managing to comprehend a small portion of it. Ian wondered how much more he could understand in this life. Later, on their way to the site of the old Ivory Tower, Lady Paige looked out of the carriage window with excitement before turning to Ian and saying that this was her first time venturing out this far. Ian smiled and agreed. Rathio, seated nearby, told Lady Paige that once they reached the capital, he would serve as their guide, revealing that, despite his appearance, he had been living in the capital for a long time, making a living through alchemy. Lady Paige smiled and thanked him. Ian looked at Rathio with confusion, not quite understanding his intentions. Just then, Vice Captain Paul, the second Imperial Knight, knocked on the carriage window to inform Ian that they had arrived. He told them that they would be staying for 2 days, per Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver's orders, and that they were free to explore the area during that time. Paul then invited everyone to follow him as he would guide them to their lodging. As they walked through the village, the locals greeted Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver warmly. One man stepped forward, saying it was an honor to have Hayden visit such a humble village, and that it would be remembered for tens of thousands of generations. Hayden chuckled lightly, downplaying the honor, saying it wasn't a big deal. Ian observed Hayden carefully and realized that the prince treated the common citizens with genuine kindness. He remembered that, in his past life, Hayden always wore a dark and hostile expression, especially when Ragnar was by his side. Now Ian saw Hayden smiling, and he understood that Hayden made those cold expressions only toward those outside the nobility. He began to understand why the Emperor favored the first prince. As they walked, Douglas called out to Ian, asking when they would be going to the old Ivory Tower. Ian asked him why he was so curious. Douglas explained that he wanted to visit as well. Ian, after a brief pause, decided that he would visit the underground areas at dawn. He told Douglas that they would go together tomorrow, when they had the time. Douglas, visibly excited, thanked Ian profusely. Seeing the two of them talking, Rathio noticed how much Douglas seemed to have taken a liking to Ian. He turned to Lady Paige and asked if Ian had always been this mature, as he found it hard to believe that Ian was only 12. Lady Paige responded that Ian had matured far earlier than most children, because he was naturally caring and kind, much like his father. She added that although Ian never said it, she knew he was trying to fill the void left by his father's absence, and she felt sorry for him. Rathio nodded, understanding that Ian was a lot like his father. He then asked Lady Paige if her husband had been a magician as well. She shook her head and explained that Fran, her husband, was not a magician, but an ordinary man. She continued, telling Rathio that Fran had gone missing before Ian was born after leaving for work one day. His belongings were returned home 5 years later, but Fran himself never returned. Lady Paige began to say something about Ian, but then stopped abruptly, brushing it off as nothing. Ian walked across the yellow grass, his mind drifting back to his past life, a journey carried by the wind and the road of stars. It had felt like an endless path after the Unification War, far removed from the Ivory Tower and the Emperor. At first, he had wondered if his entry into the Ivory Tower back then had been nothing more than a coincidence, but soon he realized it was not mere chance. Something had guided him toward that fate. As he glanced at the familiar castle before him, the same one he had seen in his past life, he noticed that it still looked the same, unchanged by the years. He recalled the great war that had occurred 300 years ago between the magicians of the Ivory Tower and the Dragonians, descendants of dragons. The Gargoyle army, along with the dark magic of the Dragonians, had been powerful enough to obliterate the Empire. Yet it was the Imperial Prince, Mitchell Greenriver, a high-class magician, who had led the other magicians to victory, defeating the Dragonians and wiping out the Gargoyles, thereby preserving the Empire's peace. After the war, Mitchell Greenriver, who had guided them to victory, refused the position of Emperor and instead became the tower owner, building a new tower in the capital, Green River Diem. Ian now understood how this place had become a ruin, abandoned by the people over time. Approaching a certain spot, Ian wondered if this was the place. He placed his fingers on the stone, and as his fingertips made contact, they began to glow. Suddenly, a staircase appeared before him. Slowly, he descended, summoning a light spell into his palm. The light illuminated the head of a gargoyle statue. Ian's gaze fixed on the statue as he remembered the surprise he had felt when he had first seen it. Then, without warning, the gargoyle broke free from its stone form with a deafening roar, groaning as it locked its eyes on Ian. Ian gritted his teeth, stunned that a gargoyle, thought to have been extinct for 300 years, was hiding here. The gargoyle roared again and leapt at him. Instinctively, Ian formed an ice ball and hurled it at the creature. The ice struck the gargoyle with force, sending it crashing into the wall. Ian realized that in his past life, he could have easily killed the gargoyle, but now, in his current state, he had to exert more effort. The gargoyle groaned as it leapt toward Ian once again. Without hesitation, Ian cast an ice spear spell, sending sharp ice fragments flying toward the gargoyle's body. He then raised his fingers, summoning a powerful lightning spell. The explosion of electricity finally finished off the gargoyle. Ian stood over the lifeless body, muttering to himself that he has taken care of the gargoyle, so now he awaits for the passage to appear. As if on cue, the ground in front of him shifted, revealing a hidden path. Ian looked down and smiled, recognizing it as the same passage from his past life. He picked up his fallen cloak, wrapped it around his shoulders, and carefully stepped forward. Soon, he came upon a table where a dragon language book rested. Smiling, he remarked to himself that he had found it much sooner than he had expected. Approaching the book, he wondered whether it had been hidden here by a dragon, or if it was the work of the first magician. He reached for it, remembering how mysterious the dragon language had been. Even in his past life, he had been unable to fully comprehend it. If only he could understand it now, he thought. But when he opened the book, he was shocked to find it empty. Confused, he wondered what had happened. But then it dawned on him. It might be because he had already used the book in his past life. Ian closed the book, feeling a pang of disappointment. He longed to reread the dragon's language, to decipher the secrets it held. He tried to speak, but no sound escaped his lips. Realizing this, Ian stared at the book and understood. The dragon's language wasn't merely spoken with the voice. It was a magical language that drew its power from mana. In that moment, Ian realized that without the dragon's language, which had now disappeared, he could no longer use time magic. Without it, he couldn't return to the past. A heavy sigh escaped him as he closed his eyes in disappointment. He had been hoping to have the ability to endlessly turn back time, but now, he understood how dangerous it could have been if he hadn't discovered this limitation. His second life had just become a lot more difficult to navigate. The carriage rolls through the bustling streets of the city, drawing closer to the horizon. Ian is informed that they will soon reach the capital of Green River Diem. He glances out the window, realizing that they are finally entering the capital and that he needs to stay alert. He can't shake the thought that if Cecilia were to flee and meet up with another Coldwalker, the Coldwood Empire would start keeping a closer eye on him. He knows Cecilia will undoubtedly speak about him, causing complications in numerous ways. His thoughts shift when a group of magicians blocks their path. Captain Oliver Raywood dismounts from his horse and demands to know by whose authority they stop Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver. The leading magician responds that it's by the order of Emperor Terry Greenriver. He explains that a command paper has been issued, transferring all authority over Cecilia and related matters to the Ivory Tower. Oliver retorts that the magician must have been in a rush to receive the command even before the spy had arrived. The magician smiles, closes his eyes, and says that urgent matters should be addressed quickly. He then informs Oliver that the ivory tower will take full responsibility from here on out. Oliver clenches his jaw and insists the magician hand over the sinner to the tower leader. The magician glares back, saying that Cecilia isn't a sinner yet, as the truth is still unknown. He reminds Oliver that Cecilia is still a magician of the ivory tower and warns him to choose his words carefully. Oliver grits his teeth and turns away. Meanwhile, the other guards mutter angrily, complaining about how the magicians are swooping in to take Cecilia, even though it was they who risked everything to capture her. One guard grumbles that it's unfair, and he won't accept it, even if it's an order from the Emperor. Ian understands their frustration. He knows the magicians aren't trying to protect Cecilia, they simply don't want knights questioning one of their own. He realizes they plan to lock her away in the deepest, most secure part of the Ivory Tower's prison, and smooth things over behind closed doors. Even if Cecilia were a spy for Coldwood, there's no way she'll escape from that prison. Lady Paige peers out from the carriage, curious about what's going on. Ian reassures her, telling her not to worry. But as his thoughts turn, a messenger interrupts, informing him that Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver wishes to make a brief stop before heading to the Imperial Palace. As the carriage arrives at a mansion, Ian steps out and looks up at the building. A wave of recognition hits him. It's the same mansion he received from Ragnar after reaching the 5th class rank in his past life. Hayden Greenriver asks Ian if he likes it and explains that this mansion was personally granted to him by Emperor Terry Greenriver. Ian bows his head in gratitude, replying that he is immeasurably indebted. Hayden chuckles and tells Ian not to be so formal. Ian recalls that in his past life, he was 26 when he received this mansion, but this time, he's received it 14 years earlier. He responds, complimenting the mansion. Hayden then mentions that for now, his family will stay here, but Ian must accompany him to the Imperial Palace to greet Emperor Terry Greenriver, as they are now in the capital. Ian politely asks Hayden if he might take a moment to look around the mansion with his mother first. Hayden grants him permission with a smile, and Ian thanks him warmly. Ian walks through the mansion with his mother, Lady Paige. He asks if she likes it, telling her that this will be their new home. Lady Paige, stunned, asks again to confirm if this is truly their house. Ian smiles and reassures her. He remembers that in his past life, his mother had already passed away by the time he received this mansion. Lady Paige gazes around in awe, commenting that the place is even more impressive than the Lord's castle. Ian thinks back, realizing that no matter how powerful he had become in his past life, he could never bring his mother back from the dead. He responds that the mansion was intended for royalty. As he looks around, Ian feels a sense of satisfaction. Everything he once wished to do for his mother and with her is now within reach. He turns to Lady Paige, asking what she thinks of the mansion, hoping that this time he'll be able to see her happy, something he never got to witness in his past life. Lady Paige, in awe, remarks on the grandeur of the place, but then her expression shifts to concern as she asks how they'll manage to clean such a large space. Ian sighs and, with a resolute smile, promises himself that from now on, his mother won't have to lift a finger for housework. Later, at the Imperial Palace of Green River Diem, Ian prepares to greet Emperor Terry Greenriver. He adjusts his sleeve nervously, thinking that in his past life, he never had the chance to meet the Emperor in person. By the time he graduated from the academy, the Emperor was already on his deathbed. Ian recalls that Emperor Terry was celebrated for his wisdom and decisiveness, and hopes he can learn something from him, if possible. As he walks through the palace, Ian glances out the window at the prince's palace and notices the 5th prince, Ragnar, the son of a concubine. He wonders what Ragnar is up to at this moment. Ian knows that while Ragnar resembles the Emperor more than any of the other princes, he inherited his father's cold-heartedness rather than his benevolence. Ian clenches his fist, thinking of Ragnar as both his old friend and his worst enemy. He wonders what approach he should take when he meets Ragnar in this life. As Ian reaches the golden doors, an attendant informs him that Emperor Terry Greenriver is waiting inside. Ian steps into the room and kneels before Emperor Terry Greenriver, touching the ground with deep respect. The Emperor commands him to raise his head, referring to him as the hero of the North. With a warm tone, Terry Greenriver praises Ian for his remarkable achievements in such a short time. Ian bows in gratitude, offering his thanks. The Emperor gestures for him to stand, telling him not to be so formal, remarking that Ian probably wasn't taught proper manners. Ian rises, recalling that the Emperor's words mirror something Ragnar once said to him in the past, that he shouldn't try so hard because he hadn't learned manners. Terry Greenriver observes that Ian has come a long way, and asks if he likes the mansion he has been given, referring to it as one of his royal homes. Ian glances at Crown Prince Hayden Greenriver, who waves at him with a smile. Ian quietly wonders why Hayden is present with the Emperor. He smiles at the Emperor, his eyes closed, and responds, saying that the mansion is so grand he could never have imagined it. The Emperor, not satisfied with just that, asks him again whether he likes it or not. Ian replies, affirming that he does, adding that his mother is also happy with it. The Emperor, leaning back with crossed arms, asks if Ian knows why he sent Hayden to bring him to the palace, and gave him a mansion as soon as he arrived. Ian contemplates whether to be direct in his answer. After all, Ragnar, who resembled the Emperor in many ways, preferred to speak plainly. Ian considers speaking honestly, but ultimately decides against it, reminding himself that he is still just 12 years old and should act like a child. Ian responds politely, telling the Emperor that it's because he is a bit more talented than others, and that, according to rumors, his magic is superior to most. The Emperor raises an eyebrow, asking if Ian truly believes he's the only one who thinks he's more talented. Hearing this, Hayden Greenriver looks at the Emperor and refrains from questioning a child like that. Terry Greenriver turns his gaze to Hayden, noting that this is the first time he's seen his son protect someone. Understanding that supporting Hayden is wise, the Emperor shifts his focus back to Ian and confirms that he did indeed summon him here because of his talent. The Emperor goes on to mention that even knights and magicians have been praising Ian's abilities. He also acknowledges Ian's role in uncovering the spy and states that since a citizen of the Empire has made such an accomplishment, it is only right they are rewarded. He then asks Ian if there's anything he wants. Ian realizes this is a prime opportunity to secure the Emperor's support, something he's been contemplating for some time. However, he reminds himself to ask for something suitable for a child, not an adult. He looks up at the Emperor and shyly says that he would like to explore the palace. The Emperor, intrigued, asks him what he means by explore. Ian explains that he wants to roam freely through the palace, showing his mother all the beautiful things within. Hayden, noticing Ian's curiosity, steps in and informs the Emperor that Ian's real wish is to see the old ivory tower. He explains that Ian, like any child, is full of curiosity, so it would be best to allow him to explore. Ian smiles at Hayden's words, and the Emperor, amused, agrees to grant Ian's request. He orders an attendant to present Ian with a seal. The attendant hands Ian the seal, and the Emperor explains that as long as Ian is in the palace, he can use it to access almost any area. If Ian needs help, he can show the seal to anyone for guidance. The Emperor then asks if there's anything else Ian desires. Ian holds the seal carefully, thanking the Emperor, and humbly replies that he doesn't know what more he could wish for. The Emperor smiles, clearly pleased, and announces that he will personally reward Ian. He gestures to his servants, who bring a large box of gold coins along with several maids. The Emperor explains that the gold is a token of his reward, and the maids will be sent to Ian's mansion to ensure his comfort. Ian looks at the maids and realizes that his mother no longer has to worry about cleaning, a burden he's happy to see lifted from her shoulders. He thanks the Emperor once more and exits the throne room. As Ian steps outside, he ponders whether the Emperor is truly different from others. Instead of warmth, Ian senses a deep suspicion directed toward him, a feeling that reminds him of Ragnar. Looking down at the seal in his hand, Ian understands that the Emperor likely acts this way with everyone, much like Ragnar. He recalls Ragnar's favorite saying, that suspicion is fundamental for ruling and governing. Determined to focus on what truly matters, Ian decides not to dwell on this feeling. There isn't much time after all. He approaches a nearby guard and asks where the garden is located. The guard eyes him suspiciously, but Ian presents the seal, explaining that the Emperor had told him to show it to anyone. Upon seeing the seal, the guard nods and tells him to follow, offering to guide him. Ian decides that he will pretend to explore the famous locations of the palace before heading to his true destination. After a while, he reaches the Empire's sanctuary. As he looks around, Ian recalls moments from his past life with Ragnar. Ragnar had once confessed that he loved this place, but was never allowed to enter because it was reserved for the Emperor and Empress. Ragnar, only a prince at the time, had been forbidden from entering, but he vowed that one day he would. Shaking off the memories, Ian enters the sanctuary carefully. There, he finds a guard dozing off in a chair. Taking a moment to ensure he isn't disturbed, Ian casts a sleeping spell on the guard, just in case. Using a light spell, he scans the room, his gaze fixed on the first Emperor's coffin. As he approaches the coffin, Ian's eyes widen. He has found it. Ian is collecting stoneheart mushrooms when he senses someone nearby. He quickly hides behind a wall, thinking there are only 3 descendants around, and that it can't possibly be Ragnar. He peeks around the corner and sees a girl talking to a man. She mentions that not many people visit this place, so sound doesn't escape from the room. As the princess, she is responsible for managing the sanctuary. Ian realizes that the girl is the first prince's blood-related younger sister, Harry Greenriver. Kevin asks Harry why she doesn't inform the Ivory Tower about it. Harry growls at him, clearly frustrated, and reminds him that he already knows how dangerous the Ivory Tower can be. She presses her palms together with a smile, assuring him that the ancestors will understand her decision, since it's for the sake of the Emperor and her older brother. Kevin smiles, closing his eyes, and says he will support her until the end. He then asks if she's memorized the basic spells he taught her last time. Harry replies that she has. Kevin asks her to demonstrate the light spell first. She suggests showing him the mana flow instead, and a small ball of light appears. Ian raises an eyebrow, surprised to see Princess Harry using magic. Harry complains, asking Kevin why her light ball is so small. Kevin smiles and reassures her, saying it's just because she's only recently started practicing magic. Watching them, Ian recalls Harry Greenriver from his past life. He remembers how she lived her entire life like a caged bird. When Ragnar rose to power and the eldest prince was executed, she followed her brother and quietly ended her own life. Ian looks at Harry, wondering why she's hiding the fact that she's also a magician. He knows that in the Green River Empire, hiding one's magical potential is considered a sin. The same rule applies to private magic education outside of the Ivory Tower or the Academy. Ian is certain that the magician is aware of this fact. Princess Harry Greenriver requests that Kevin teach her attack magic next time, something like Volcano. Kevin apologizes, saying he can't even use that spell himself. Harry chuckles, teasing him, and says she was just kidding. Suddenly, Harry turns around, confused, claiming she heard a noise. Kevin tells her to wrap it up for today, noting that it would be bad if someone saw them. She smiles, reassuring him that only royalty can enter this place. Ian leaves the sanctuary and looks up at it from outside, realizing he's uncovered many surprising things today. He concludes that the reason Harry Greenriver is risking the sin of hiding her magic from the Ivory Tower is likely because she's wary of the tower, which supports Ragnar. Ian decides it's time to leave, as he's already spent quite a bit of time there. He walks towards the exit, and a guard asks if he's explored enough. Ian replies that he's satisfied, thinking to himself that he's explored more than enough. Ian reaches his mansion and walks inside. He looks at Rathio and asks where his mother and the others are. Rathio informs Ian that Lady Paige is chatting with servants sent from the Imperial Palace, while Douglas is taking a look around the mansion. Ian remarks that it's great and asks Mr. Rathio if they could have a chat for a moment. Rathio looks at him in confusion, but agrees to speak with him. Ian tells Mr. Rathio that he needs him to create a secret potion for him. Mr. Rathio asks what kind of potion Ian has in mind. Ian shows him the Stoneheart mushrooms, explaining that they're poisonous, paralyze the body, and stop the heart. Mr. Rathio asks Ian if he wants him to make a secret potion with such a dangerous mushroom. He acknowledges that a poison potion might be possible, but a secret potion would be difficult. Ian asks if Mr. Rathio has heard of interrogation magic. Mr. Rathio replies that he has. Ian explains that he needs a secret potion to protect himself from that magic and asks if it's possible. Mr. Rathio says that he'd need to experiment first unless it's urgent. Ian replies that it's urgent. As they're about to discuss it further, there's a knock on the door, and a maid enters with a letter. She informs Ian that the Ivory Tower has sent him a message. Ian picks up the letter from the Ivory Tower and begins reading it. He realizes that they're calling him in because, like royalty, they cannot wait to meet him. Although it would be proper for them to wait until the official enrollment day at the Academy, it would be difficult to teach such a talented magician alongside beginners. The letter states they want him to come in 1 week. Ian turns to Mr. Rathio and asks if it will be difficult. Mr. Rathio reassures him that it won't be a problem in 1 week, though he'll have to sacrifice his sleep. Ian apologizes for the inconvenience, saying he will entrust the task to him. A week had passed, and Ian sat inside the moving horse-drawn carriage, holding the bottle of medicine that Rathio had made using Stoneheart mushrooms. He believed drinking it would stabilize his heartbeat for 2 hours. As he gazed out of the window, he realized he was back in the place where he had let go of everything and left. He spoke to himself, almost in disbelief, that he was back. Upon arriving at the Ivory Tower, someone informed Ian that they had reached their destination. A girl with glasses approached him, welcomed him, and offered to guide him to the owner. She led him to the first floor, explaining that it was the entrance hall. As Ian looked around, he realized the place looked exactly as it had before. The girl with glasses pointed out a golden plate and asked if he saw it. Ian confirmed he did, and she explained that the golden plate was called the Mana Elevator, a device that allowed people to travel between different floors of the tower. She added that the golden plates were reserved for high-tier magicians, enabling them to reach the highest floors directly. She instructed Ian to step onto the plate, mentioning that high-tier magicians were waiting for him on the highest floor, in the owner's room. After bidding him farewell, the Mana Elevator began lifting Ian upwards. Once the elevator reached the highest floor, Ian stood before a door. As it opened, he entered the room and saw the owner. The owner greeted him, expressing gratitude for accepting the invitation to the tower. Ian glanced around at the other high-tier magicians, feeling confused. The owner noticed his unease and reassured him, inviting him to take a seat. The owner acknowledged that Ian might be surprised but assured him there was no need to be scared. This was a standard requirement for all magicians joining the tower. Ian took a seat, sensing an underlying tension in the room, as though they were waiting to see how he would respond. Luminous text appeared above the owner's hand. The owner began explaining that while they knew much about Ian's talents, he was impressive even without considering them. He mentioned that they had some suspicions about Ian and needed to clear them up. Ian listened attentively, asking if they were planning to torture him. The owner laughed and clarified that barbaric methods were not used in the tower. They only wanted to ask him a few questions, and he was expected to answer them. The owner started reading from the glowing text, detailing Ian's background, his birth year, zodiac sign, his father, Fran Paige, a wandering explorer, and his mother, Vanessa Paige, who had once been a servant in the castle. He then asked Ian if any of this information was incorrect. Ian confirmed that it was all true. A bald man then inquired about Ian's relationship with the alchemist Ratheo. Ian explained that his mother had been very weak, and he had sought an alchemist to provide medicine. The Lord had recommended Ratheo to him. A woman with short hair then asked why Ian had truly come to the ivory tower. Ian explained that he had read about it in books and always wanted to see it for himself. Another man asked if Ian remembered Cecilia. Ian confirmed he did. The man then demanded that Ian swear he had seen Cecilia communicating with someone wearing a mask, and that when Cecilia had been caught, she had tried to kill him. Ian swore it was true, adding that he truly thought he was going to die. A gray-haired woman then asked Ian to swear that no one had taught him magic. Ian swore that no one had ever taught him magic. However, the woman pressed further, asking how Ian knew so many spells, like Fireball, Spirit Summoning, and Frost Nova. She demanded a plausible explanation, not just a random excuse. Ian replied that he had simply imagined the magic, starting with fire in his palm, and one day, it had become a reality. To prove it, he conjured a fireball in his palm. A man in the room shouted in disbelief, questioning how such a thing was possible. The room buzzed with murmurs and speculation about Ian's claim. The owner of the ivory tower, observing that even the tower's most powerful interrogation magic had failed to disprove Ian's story, began to consider other possibilities. He wondered if Ian could be the reincarnation of the legendary first magician. Another possibility was that Ian had such a high-class magic ability that interrogation magic simply couldn't affect him. The owner studied Ian with growing intrigue, realizing that it didn't make sense for such a young child to possess so much mana. He was left wondering what Ian's true intentions were. Just then, a girl named Helene stepped forward, her eyes filled with fury. She approached Ian with an air of hostility, growling at the others to stop wasting time with pointless questions. She demanded that they ask the real question, glaring at Ian as she did so. The others tried to intervene, urging Helene to calm down. They reminded her that the owner and the others were here to ask Ian questions, but Helene ignored them all. Her attention was solely focused on Ian, and with an intense glare, she demanded to know what he truly was. Helene demanded that Ian tell them what he truly was, questioning why he was spouting nothing but nonsense. Ian, silently staring at her, recalled that before arriving, she had been the youngest fourth-class magician, known for her aggressive nature, earning the nickname Lady of Fire. He asked her if she didn't already know. Helene, now even more furious, demanded to know what he was talking about. Ian pointed at the luminous text and calmly explained that it clearly stated he was born in 488 and his zodiac sign was a red goat. He asked if she hadn't read it. Helene, her fists clenched in rage, yelled at Ian, furious that he dared to speak to her in such a way. The owner, observing the escalating tension, ordered them to stop. He declared it was enough and turned his attention to Ian, stating that he had one last question to ask. The owner mentioned hearing about an accident when Ian underwent his mana reaction test. He referred to the soldier Jonathan, who had disrespected Ian and his mother, and was found dead the next day, with small traces of mana found on him. The owner asked if Ian had any connection to Jonathan's death. Ian immediately realized that the tower owner was not in his position without reason. The owner's approach was methodical, always considering a third possibility instead of relying solely on magic. Ian understood that a normal person would have panicked and become frightened when faced with such an accusation, but if his heart rate remained steady, it would only raise more suspicion. He wondered if he should end the effect of the medicine now, or simply tell them what they wanted to hear, since the owner had stated this was the last question. Ian looked at the owner and replied that he knew nothing about Jonathan's death. Everyone in the room eyed him with suspicion. The owner asked again, pressing if Ian truly had no connection to it. Ian confirmed his innocence. The tower owner closed his eyes, seemingly satisfied, and said that he had known all along that Ian could not have been responsible for Jonathan's death. He thanked Ian for his honest answer to such a difficult question. Then, the owner revealed that the entire story about the traces of mana on Jonathan's body had been fabricated. In reality, Jonathan had simply tripped on a bridge and died. Ian, angered, glared at him. The owner, unfazed, commented that he would love to wrap things up and get something to eat but still had business to attend to. He asked Ian to be understanding, explaining that since Ian's talents had never been seen before, even in the tower, they needed to consider his current limits and potential for growth. The tower owner then showed Ian a device, explaining that it was a mana battery, an essential component that powered most of the tower. The battery, he explained, currently held very little mana, which is why it appeared blank. As more mana was added, its color would change to blue. The owner then asked Ian to add mana into it. Ian, confused, asked if he was supposed to add all of his mana. The owner confirmed, stating that since they were trying to gauge Ian's limits, he was expected to give his full amount. Ian stood up from his seat and walked toward the mana battery, contemplating its capacity. He considered that it could hold mana equivalent to that of a third-class master, but he decided that adding an amount similar to that of a second-class master would be the best approach. As Ian placed his head against the mana battery, he reminded himself that if he showed the expected amount of mana, he could avoid suspicion and be placed in a decent class. But then, a thought crossed his mind. He questioned why he was doing this at all. He reminded himself that he was just an 8th-class magician, not a philosopher or someone who would go down in history. Yet he knew that magic was the only thing he understood, the only thing he could rely on. Ian continued adding mana into the battery, more forcefully than before, reminding himself that he had always lived strategically, calculating every move. He could give up power, authority, and glory, but magic was all that mattered. He poured everything he had into the mana battery, pushing his power beyond anything expected. Suddenly, the mana battery shattered, unable to contain the overwhelming mana Ian had channeled. Everyone, including the tower owner, stared in shock at the broken device. Ian, panting heavily, stood there, his energy having far exceeded that of a third-class master. Helene, in disbelief, picked up a broken piece of the mana battery, knowing it was only designed to hold up to a third-class master's mana. She looked at Ian, her mind racing, unable to comprehend how a child like him could surpass even a third-class master. As the realization settled in, Ian, still breathing heavily, walked away slowly from the scene. The sun gently touched the tower's balcony. One of the magicians slammed his fist on the table in frustration, declaring that all the rumors about Ian Paige were true. Not only was he a 4th-class magician, but that meant he was on par with all of them, except for the owner. He added that Ian's reaction when asked about Jonathan's death was the unmistakable behavior of someone lying. The magician, voice rising, demanded to know what everyone thought that meant. He argued that before Ian became an even greater threat, they needed to act fast and put a leash on him. He proposed that they cancel Ian's graduation from the academy and his 5 years of service, urging them to tame him immediately. The tower owner crossed his arms, acknowledging that it would be a tough task, but agreeing that Ian's time at the academy would only be a waste. He was too dangerous for the other students. The owner raised the question of how the newcomers and young magicians would feel about having a 4th-class magician as their classmate. He believed that Ian had either killed Jonathan or played a role in preventing his death. While he didn't see that as a major issue, he noted that the real concern was that, despite the success of the interrogation magic, they could never be sure whether Ian's lies would fool them. The owner emphasized that their top priority was the tower's reputation. The stronger the magicians they held, the higher the tower's standing would rise. He suggested that, rather than eliminating Ian, they should accept him as the 12th high-class magician and officially announce the arrival of a 4th-class magician. However, given Ian's talent and age, it would be best for him to receive specialized education from a high-class magician. Everyone nodded in agreement with the tower owner. Smiling, feeling satisfied with their consensus, he asked who would take charge of Ian Page's education. One of the magicians raised their hand, offering to take on the responsibility. Outside the ivory tower, Ian looked up at it, surprised that he had been recognized as a high-class magician so quickly. A girl with glasses caught his attention. Ian looked up at her and remarked that they had met again. She informed him that she had heard the news about Ian being a 4th-class magician. Ian smiled and confirmed, stating that it was true. The girl praised him, impressed that a high-class magician of his caliber was only 12 years old, and mentioned that all the rumors she had heard about him seemed to be true. Ian gave an awkward smile and asked what kind of rumors were circulating about him. She replied that he had probably heard them, and then informed him that she had been appointed as his supporting magician for the year. Ian smiled and said that he was in her care, then added that she should feel free to speak more casually with him, since she was his senior. The girl, maintaining a formal demeanor, agreed that as his senior, she would take responsibility and guide him through the ivory tower. Ian thanked her, and she began to lead him inside. The girl showed Ian the Ivory Tower's Magic Academy, and explained that he was supposed to be enrolled today, but instead, he would be receiving special training from the high-class magicians. Ian quickly realized that they were just trying to turn him into a loyal dog under the guise of special training. He sighed, already having expected this from Herbert. As they walked, Ian glanced at his old academy friends. He remembered standing there with them, but they had all been assassinated by a Coldwood spy during the First Unification War. He never thought he would see them again. Ian smiled softly at the memory, thinking that while it might be hard to become best friends with them again, he should go and say hello to them soon. The girl led Ian to a door and explained that it was his personal laboratory. She mentioned that she had heard he would be using it, so she had cleaned it with magic. As Ian stepped inside, he realized that it was the same room from his past life. The girl looked at him with a smile and explained that when the tower was first built 300 years ago, there were 24 high-class magicians, but now there were less than half of that. So many rooms were left unused. She told him that the tower owner wanted him to use this room for his personal needs. She then asked him to wait, as she would go and fetch the magician in charge of him. As she left and closed the door, Ian touched the furniture and reflected that it had been a long time since he had entered this room. He realized that he had obtained this room 7 years earlier than in his past life. With his new status as a high-class magician, Ian understood that he needed to build a new force within the Ivory Tower. He had 6 years before Ragnar would begin moving under the tower owner's protection. Ian knew that he would need a powerful force to counter Ragnar, who would be protected by Herbert. Ian understood that power in the tower was based on loyalty to the owner, so if he rose above the owner in rank, there would come a time when he could seize control of the tower entirely. For now, Ian decided it was best to act like a well-behaved child. He knew he couldn't even surpass 5th class in his current form. Suddenly, Ian sensed someone's presence in the room. He turned to see Helene entering and smirked, realizing they had sent her. She entered with an air of arrogance, greeting him and calling him an arrogant brat. Helene places her hand on her waist and again calls Ian an arrogant brat, reflecting that it's been a while since they met each other. Ian looks up at her and wonders if she is the one who took care of the broken battery. Helene smirks and informs that she can see that arrogance is just an understatement for him. She approaches Ian and states that he has probably heard about the standard manners, the tower's history, magic theory, and all the stuff he should learn from the academy. Helene informs him that the owner wants to teach him inside the tower because he does not want other kids to lose their confidence if a monster like Ian joins them. Ian continues to listen to her silently. Helene picks up the books from the shelf and throws them, asking what use all of this would be. She says that boring crap like this is not her forte, and that the old hags can teach it better than her. Helene leans down closer to Ian and asks if he has defeated Cecilia. She states that she had high expectations for Cecilia because Cecilia had quite a name in the magic combat field, but she turned out to be a spy. Helene looks at Ian and says that he was able to defeat Cecilia. She tells him that since she is his teacher, so she wants to teach him something. Helene explains that there are different types of magicians, like a magician trained for combat, a magician trained to support others, and a magician who spends all his life studying spells, while all the others are just leftovers. Helene looks at Ian and asks what he thinks, what type of magician she is. Ian replies that he thinks she is the first one. She turns around properly with a proud smile and confirms it, saying that she bets no one can beat her in that field. Helene tells Ian that she is different from the other magicians who only care about the gracefulness of a high-class magician. She states that she is going to teach him her way and commands him to follow her, declaring that he has no right to refuse. Ian follows Helene to the garden. She looks at Ian and asks if he understands what he has to do here. Helene asks Ian to come at her and make her want to teach him. Ian realizes that she is no different from his past life. Ian recalls that even back then, she annoyed him by challenging him. He decides that this time, he will not let Helene start and cuts her off. The kids watch them and murmurs that it is a bit dangerous challenge for Ian to fight Helene. Helene glances at the kids with a smirk and says there seem to be enough spectators. She places her hand on her waist and asks Ian to go first, stating that she will wait for him since she is his teacher. Ian removes his fall cloak and asks Helene if she is sure about it.